Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Check out fullpresscoverage.com for all sorts of great articles and other awesome content for basically whatever sports team you follow, whatever sports you follow. They have it. So check it out. You can find our podcast wherever podcasts are in fact found. I hope everybody had a great weekend and is ready because we have a great show today as the NBA just wrapped up their regular season yesterday. The seedings are set. The play-in tournament is set. And the other big event that happened over the weekend, Sap, was the members of the 2020 class of the Hall of Fame got their induction ceremony because everything is now delayed because of the coronavirus. But we saw what is perhaps the greatest class, and we're going to debate this in a second, go into the Hall of Fame with Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, and Tim Duncan, three guys who could headline a class by themselves in any particular year. They all go in together. Sap, did you check out the speeches, the pre-pomp and circumstance, all that stuff? Were you watching?
Yeah, absolutely. I found Tim Duncan's speech to be very revealing. He's a sensitive guy. I think he revealed more in his acceptance speech more than in his nearly 20-year NBA career. He always kept things close to the vest. He was not an emotional player. I think he's one of the 10 greatest players in the history of the sport. And if you were to power rank the 3-star players that were going into the Hall of Fame, I'd go Duncan, Kobe, Kevin Garnett in that order. And I thought it was pretty cool the way he handled it. Kevin Garnett, to no one's surprise, was intense, even in his acceptance speech. And it was pretty cool to have Isaiah Thomas there. They're probably the two greatest players to come out of Chicago, along with Dwayne Wade, really in the history of basketball. And of course, the headliner was the late, great Kobe Bryant, who was inducted in by his beautiful wife, Vanessa Bryant. And, you know, for the strength that she showed to get up there, not only losing her husband, also her second daughter in that helicopter crash a year ago. I mean,
Unimaginable.
Right. I don't know how you can handle that. You lost your most close to and one of your 4 daughters. I mean, how do you continue on? And she seems to be incredibly tough as well. I thought they were really cool speeches. They generally are. You know, I mean, we know Michael Jordan in 2009 went scorched earth, you know,
Yes,
and I would assume when
best
Tom
Hall
Brady
of Fame
gets
speech ever.
probably it's right up there. When Tom Brady gets inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in probably 2040, because that means he retires in 2035, which wouldn't shock me. He'll be like, you know,
right.
57 years old, still playing. I'm sure he's going to have a scorched earth type of speech.
I was thinking the year 3000 is when he's going to get.
Yeah, why not? Why not? You know, 23-year-old Tom Brady finally gave it up and is now going into the Hall of Fame. He may be so damn old they may have to waive the 5-year waiting period and just put him right in, which I've always felt that way anyway. With the no-brainers, why are we waiting 5 years to put them in? In the case of Kobe Bryant, he would have been alive to be inducted. Not that this happens very often.
So you're saying with certain exceptions should be made?
Yeah, I mean, do we have to wait 5 years for Michael Jordan? Like, when we kind of knew he was going to be in the Hall of Fame, we're going to.
What was the purpose? What's the initial purpose? Like, they were worried people were going to come back, and they didn't want to induct anybody who is currently in the league.
That kind of happened in the Pro Football Hall of Fame with some of the coaches, because, you know, like Bill Parcells kept coming back, so they didn't want to put him in. Look, Jay Wright is part of the 2021 class. He's still doing a great job at Villanova. He's in the Hall of Fame, and we don't wait for the coaches to retire 5 years. I get it that they're older, but, you know, we're putting coaches in that are, you know, Jay Wright's 59 years old and still has a lot left. So why do we have to wait 5 years for certain players?
A lot.
It does. I mean, maybe shorten it to 3. I think because years ago there was a backlog, right? So you know, you would put so many in, but man, the Basketball Hall of Fame puts everybody in there. The class of 2021 is going to have 16 members.
Well, I think you must be happy with inducted. That class, Sep. You lobbied for Chris Webber and you got in.
Yes, I did. Yes, and Ben Wallace, I think. And I'm not normally a fan of a player like Ben Wallace. I'm sure you were probably celebrating when Ben Wallace got in. You know, guy who really didn't offer much offensively, but great rebounder, great defender. But I think both of those guys deserve to be into the Hall of Fame. The one that keeps not getting in, besides Marcus Johnson, who was my favorite player when I was growing up, and I think he belongs in there. Bobby Dandridge made it through the Veterans Committee, and Marcus Johnson was better than Bobby Dandridge. I saw both of those guys play. Jack McCloskey, who was the general manager of the Detroit Pistons, should be in the Hall of Fame. He was the architect of that Pistons team that won back-to-back titles, and he did it without bringing in free agents. He did it organically by drafting players, building a roster, making trades, drafting Dennis Rodman in the second round, going with a coach in Chuck Daly, who was a disaster in Cleveland, but Jack McCloskey knew that Chuck Daly could coach, especially high-level talent. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Jerry Krause is in there, yes, and he deserves to be in there because, he was the general manager of 6 championship teams, but he had Michael Jordan for those 6 teams. So, and he didn't even draft him. He was already a Bull when Jerry Krause became the general manager of the Bulls, but Jack McCloskey should be in there. But back to the class of 2020. It was just, how could you not be incredibly impressed by Vanessa Bryant for her to get up there and do what she did? And again, Tim Duncan, who always gets overlooked, is like the third guy as far as the inductions, because Garnett's got a great personality and Tim Duncan is just a chill type of guy.
Believe it or not, I actually thought he had the best speech in terms
I
of
think so too.
mixing humor and poignancy. So I watched. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch all the other people get inducted. I'm sure that the woman coach from Bentley, I'm sure had a nice speech and all those things too. But I just watched the 3 players and their speeches. Shame on me, but whatever. I really liked Duncan. I thought he was funny. I thought he thanked the right people. I liked the way he structured it with going from, growing up and being a swimmer to who helped him get to the next level there, then to the Wake Forest level, then to the San Antonio Spurs level. So I think that he did a really good job. Yeah, for someone you haven't heard speak all that often. And I like his new hairstyle with he's got a little bit of the cornrows going on. He looks relaxed and happy. He also looks like he could play right now and put up a double-double. So I think that it was a really good night with an unbelievably strong class. Each speech was a little bit different and each sort of representative of the player and their career. Obviously, I would have loved to hear what Kobe Bryant, had he been alive, would have said. And that's something that we'll never know because obviously his speech would be very different from what his wife's was, which was more of a memorial to Kobe Bryant. I would imagine Kobe's speech would probably echo some of the same thing Jordan's did, considering how similar the two of them were. But yeah, it was a really good night. 3 good speeches, 3 of the greatest players to ever play the game. So you can't really ask for much more from a Hall of Fame ceremony.
No, I think it's the greatest class ever. I'm giving my opinion away because we're going to talk about what's a better Hall of Fame class, 2009 with Michael Jordan, David Robinson, and John Stockton, or the class from 2020, of course, with Kobe, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett. I think this is the greatest class in the history of the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I'm not going to go deep into like the 9th member of the class. I'm just going top heavy with the 3 great players. I think it's a fascinating debate. Look, when Jordan gets inducted right off the bat, you kind of swaying it in his direction.
Sure.
But I think if you were to look at those 6 players, that if this was an open draft, Jordan would go first. I think Duncan would go second. Kobe would go third. Garnett maybe slightly over Robinson. I have Garnett as the 22nd greatest player ever. David Robinson 25th. So there's not a huge difference between those two. But then I have John Stockton in like the late 30s. So I think that he kind of weighs down that class. And look, I have a tendency to underrate John Stockton. I know that he's the all-time assist leader. I get that. But you know what?
By a wide margin.
By a wide margin. But Pete Rose is the all-time hits leader by a fairly wide margin too. And no one thinks he's the greatest baseball player ever. No one thinks that John Stockton is the greatest basketball player ever. He's not even in my top 6 or 7 point guards, to be quite honest with you. I don't hold it against him because he was asked to be on the dream team and he accepted, but I think Isaiah Thomas should have been on that dream team instead of John Stockton. But if Isaiah went, you wouldn't have had Michael Jordan. And in 1992, as is the case then, and as is still the case, he is the biggest star in basketball. So you make the accommodations for MJ. But I think it's pretty fascinating. You'd like to lean more to the old guys more than I do. So I'm interested to see what you think of which is a better class, because we actually have it on Twitter right now at John Sapp 25, and the early returns are 63% for the class of 2009, 37% for the class of 2020, which leads me to this conclusion, Jet. I could put up a poll of who had a better baseball career, Michael Jordan or Barry Bonds. I think Jordan would win that poll.
You might.
Like any poll Jordan's in, he's going to win.
Yeah,
Right?
get swayed very heavily towards Michael Jordan's direction. Also, Sap, John Stockton, the steals leader by a wide margin too. So he
Played
does
a lot
have
of games.
two NBA records, which is it's pretty good. Yeah, typically I do skew older, but this class is just so good, and I would take Garnett over Robinson just slightly because I think he was a more versatile player.
Yep.
I look at the range, and perhaps if Robinson played right now, he'd have a 3-point shot for all I know.
Sure.
So maybe that's unfair to say he wasn't as versatile because he did what he was asked to do, and he did it phenomenally well. He won an MVP award. He had a 70-point game. He had a quadruple double. So I mean, it's hard to find any flaws in David Robinson's game. I guess the one flaw you could say is similar to the flaw with Kevin Garnett is that he didn't win a championship until he was joined by another all-time great player in Tim Duncan, and Garnett didn't win a championship until he joined, two other all-time greats. Although I do really appreciate that he did not mention Ray Allen in his speech when he was thanking everybody else. I love that level of pettiness. I think is fantastic. Him and Pierce just hate Ray Allen. That's the sentiment of most Boston Celtics fans. So you could just tell Garnett just oozes Boston. He said his biggest regret was not coming to Boston earlier. I mean, he loves Minnesota, obviously, but I think the passion for basketball in Boston, especially we talked about this in the last podcast, when they're good, it resonated with somebody like Garnett, who was just obsessed with basketball and obsessed with winning.
And I think his connection with Bill Russell was so cool when he first got here, right? It's like, let me reach out to the greatest winner in the history of American professional sports, which Bill Russell is. And he hates being called that because it diminishes what he did off the court, which is heroic unto itself. But Bill Russell won 11 championships in 13 years, and it was the way he figured out ways to win. It wasn't that he physically dominated everybody, although Bill Russell was a phenomenal athlete. He did it with his mind, with his heart. And I think that Kevin Garnett said, I want to learn as much from Bill Russell as I possibly can. I know Bill Russell now is approaching his late 80s. Maybe it'd be pretty cool if he could make a trip to Boston, although, at that age, people aren't traveling, although Bill Russell was at the Hall of Fame induction, which is pretty cool.
Kevin Garnett shouted him out in his speech. He did say.
That was awesome. And that's the part I love about Bill Russell, too. Here's a guy who played in a different era and people forget about him. And again, I think he's the third greatest player ever. Here I am giving up all my rankings, but he embraces the modern players. I love that. I love when older guys
he has a relationship
do that.
with them, and they have a relationship with him.
They love him. I mean, the times, not last year, but
he loves basketball, Sap. I mean,
he loves basketball, and he loves these young guys that are really into the social issues. He respects LeBron. LeBron loves him. We've seen them together at the finals. When LeBron wins the MVP of the finals, it's the Bill Russell Award. So I just find that so cool. But maybe Bill Russell can make a trip to Boston or they should fly the whole damn team out to visit him to maybe just get that winning charisma, that leadership that oozes from Bill Russell. Maybe it will inject a little bit into the Celtics sorry franchise or sorry team right now. I don't want to call them a sorry franchise, but a sorry team that they've developed into this year.
Yeah. I think anybody, if you look at Bill Russell, it's just, you're looking at a living legend, icon, one of the greatest athletes, not just in North American history, but in sports history in general.
Yep.
So, and it's cool that he's still involved with the game, and the NBA keeps him active with league activities, and he, I think, genuinely enjoys remaining active in his older age and being part of the league and connecting with the younger players. So yeah, it's I think Celtics in particular have a special bond with him because he played his whole freaking career for the Celtics. He's a Celtic lifer. He coached the Celtics. He's going into the Hall of Fame next year as the coach of the Celtics, more so because of the significance of him being the first black head coach in the NBA than he wasn't a particularly great head coach, but he was a very significant head coach.
He won 2 titles in 3 years as a head coach.
Yeah,
And
technically he did.
he motivated himself to play.
He did, yeah.
But could you just think of like any coaches today, or any players today at the end of their career to try to motivate them, or knowing that the only person that could motivate them is themselves, that says, you know what, damn, I'm going to coach the team. I mean, we kid that LeBron coaches the Lakers. I would think that he'd be the first candidate among today's players. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I know they talked about they don't need
Chris
coaches
Paul,
in Brooklyn.
I guess.
Chris Paul would be the other guy. I would think LeBron, Chris Paul.
You need the
would
buffer,
probably make
though,
the most
Sep.
sense.
These guys they make too much money. They've all been
Exactly.
good for too long. You need the buffer. Even if LeBron is doing the running everything on the court, which he is, you need the guy, the in between, to separate the player and the coaching staff. You can't. It wouldn't work now. They make too much money.
No, yeah. I mean, why would you want to bother with that too?
Right.
And also, Bill Russell was an executive with the Seattle Supersonics and coached the Supersonics. He put together a team that won a championship in 1979. That was pretty much his team that he formed. I mean, he's the one who drafted Dennis Johnson in the second round and said, this kid's going to be a special player. He was right about that. And he put together, downtown Freddie Brown and Gus Williams and the rest of the team, which, again, people forget about the 70s because the sport was kind of a niche sport in the 70s. It really was. I mean, by 1980, the finals were on tape delay. But, he was also the architect of that team. But kind of fascinating that he's now in as he will be in as a coach when that ceremony takes place in the later summer, early fall.
Yeah, and it's a very Celtic-centric head class led by Paul Pierce, is the best of the players being inducted. Paul Pierce, Chris Bosh, Ben Wallace.
Did you try to sneak that one by me? I don't know. That's
better than Chris Webber.
Yeah, I would say so. Is he better than Chris Bosh, 11-time All-Star?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Undoubtedly.
Okay. I mean, Ben Wallace would be fourth among the players without question. I mean, was a dynamite defensive player.
I'm not a huge Chris Bosh guy. I just like you're not a John Stockton guy. I'm not a big Chris Bosh guy.
Maybe, to perpetrate my LeBron narrative, I should diminish Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade.
Probably,
make it look like he won those titles by himself. It's perfect. It always works that way. Anthony Davis sucks. If the Lakers win the title, it's in spite of Anthony Davis, not LeBron. That's a debate we can have some other time. But I'm probably with you on that. I would say Pierce. I mean, look, of the four guys, Pierce does have a Finals MVP. That's a pretty amazing accomplishment, considering in that playoff you had to beat LeBron James in the second round of the playoffs, and then you had to beat Kobe Bryant in the finals. And at that point, those were the two best players in the world, and Paul Pierce and his team, because he had help with Kevin Garnett and the rest of those guys, but they figured out a way to beat those two great players.
Right. So you could make the argument, even though I think Garnett was the better player at the time when they were he did win Finals MVP. So you could make the argument he was the best player on a championship team.
Sure.
And Chris Bosh, you cannot come close to making that argument.
No. There was a definitive pecking order from LeBron to Wade to Bosh. I think there was a game 7 where Bosh didn't even score, and they still won.
Even when Pierce was sort of a solo actor, when he had Antoine Walker, he had more individual success than Chris Bosh did when he was in Toronto, which, they didn't have very much individual success at all until Kawhi Leonard came along.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. You're talking, a long period of time. I just like Chris Bosh's voice. I think he has a great voice. He'd be like,
I like his personality. I think
he's
got a good personality.
Great personality. Really smart guy. And he seems like an approachable guy too. I mean, how approachable can you be when you're 6'11"? I mean, that is always kind of intimidating. But yeah, I like him personally more than I actually liked him as a player. I thought he was I think he's worthy of the Hall of Fame. I know when this 2021 class came out, everyone was like, oh my God, they just let everybody in, which I'm kind of like Cotton Fitzsimmons is going in. I don't think he was any kind of great coach. He's going in as a contributor. Tony Kukoc is going in. The foreign committee put him in.
Dino Raja got in,
if Dino Raja is in, but it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. So like Jack McCloskey was better at his job than Tony Kukoc or Dino Raja, yet he's not in. Marcus Johnson was a much better player than those two guys. He's not in. Like, what are we doing here? Would Marcus Johnson have been better off playing in Spain instead of the NBA for 10 years?
Born in Spain.
Maybe that's the case.
Sap, we did this, I think, at the Herald one time where I gave you a complete revision of what I would do for the Hall of Fame, because I think the Basketball Hall of Fame is turned into, it's not a joke, but it's too easy to get in. It is. Baseball was the best. Now they've sort of been a little too lenient with who they're letting in.
Yeah, Harold
Football,
Baines.
I don't even know how the hell football's Hall of Fame works. It's sometimes their
Okay, I can
decisions.
explain it to you. It's like how they elect the Pope.
Right.
It's a similar
That's not much
setup
of an explanation.
well, yeah, no, everybody, especially since you're Jewish and I'm a lapsed Catholic, I'm probably more of an atheist than anything. But they basically have 48 football writers or broadcasters or whoever's on that committee go into a secretive room, and someone will make a case for a player. And in the case of Tom Brady, whoever's representing the Boston market at that point will stand up and say, I submit Tom Brady for the Hall of Fame. And that will be the end of it. It'll be a unanimous vote. Maybe there'll be one asshole out there that will bring up Deflategate or something, but you get my point. Whereas baseball's fairly transparent with, all of the voters. My only problem is so many of those voters don't even cover the sport anymore, and
Right.
don't even appear to like the sport anymore. So they just haphazardly fill out ballots. Basketball, yeah. I mean, look, Cotton Fitzsimmons is in. May he rest in peace. He was a really kind of a fun. There's the other thing. Cotton Fitzsimmons was a great interview. Because I remember interviewing him several times in the 80s. He was great.
Yeah, so
He's
there's
a great guy
media
to talk
bias
to.
in terms of they
But
like
is
the
he
person
a Hall
who
of
gets in.
Famer? Right. Whereas, some other guy like Greg Popovich, I think once you break through is a fascinating interview. Obviously, he's going to make it his first year on the ballot because he's arguably the greatest coach in the history of the sport. So, yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like Cotton Fitzsimmons is in. Rick Adelman?
Yeah, no, there's weird choices, and there's a lot of players I would just outright get rid of. I think of this class, I would put Paul Pierce in. I mean, he did win high title, historic franchise, all that stuff. Personally, I wouldn't put any of the other players in.
Even Chris Webber?
Even Chris Webber, I would consider Chris. I think Chris Webber's better than Chris Bosh, my personal opinion.
I think Chris Paul's better than both of them if we're going to keep on Chris's.
Chris Paul is better than both of them.
Yes.
I agree with you there.
Chris Paul's the greatest Chris to ever play in the NBA.
Yes, yeah, he is.
I'll go with that.
Better than Chris Mullin too.
Ooh, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
I would.
Better than Marquise Chris, another Chris.
Much better. Yep.
Yeah, I would like it to be very difficult to get into the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It's not. But it is what it is. So yeah, based off of the standard they set, these guys should all be in the Hall of Fame because they're better than other players who are in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, it makes sense. And I get the Marcus Johnson thing now has become a legitimate gripe because he's better than some players that are in ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think at his best, he was better than Chris Bosh. He had a shorter career. He had a really catastrophic injury when he was 30, and he never really played again. He came back a few years later and played like 10 games. But he was also a national champion in college at UCLA. Now, maybe that's not saying much, but
it's still a Basketball Hall of Fame.
It was the second to last championship UCLA's ever won. He wasn't like tagging along with, Kareem,
right? I'm saying
or Bill Walton.
It's
the
still
sum
of your parts as a basketball player because it's not just NBA; it's all basketball.
He was College Player of the Year, his senior year at UCLA. His first 7-8 years in the league, he was one of the 5 to 8 best players in the league. I mean, I've compared Jason Tatum and Marcus Johnson. Similar, I think some of their stuff was similar. He couldn't shoot like Jason Tatum, but then again, back then people didn't shoot like Jason Tatum. But you get my point. I think he deserves to be considered more so than he has been. He's always like a finalist, and maybe he'll break through. I mean, Bobby Dandridge was really good. He was not as good as Marcus Johnson, but he's going in through the Veterans Committee. So maybe in 5 years, if that's how Marcus Johnson has to get in, then that's the case. Again, I'm not going to lose sleep over this, but
Weber was the guy you stumped for a while, saying I think you thought he was the best player to not be in.
Yeah.
And now, does that fall to Marcus Johnson is the best player to not be in?
Probably. Yeah, I would say so. So maybe I got to write another column. He only played 690 games. That's the part that hurts me. If he had played 2 or 3 more years, and let's not forget, he was a 21-7-4 guy, which back then was damn good. Then I think he's a no-brainer. And he never got to the finals. He played in the same era with Bird and Julius Erving, so he was going to be the 3rd best forward in basketball, never the 1st or the 2nd.
And as far as Chris Webber goes, and this is the last thing I'm going to touch on in this class, is that He probably did get screwed out of having that one championship to his name because of the Tim Donaghy refereeing stuff in that Western Conference Finals with the Kings and the Lakers. There were some really screwy referee things going on there. Yeah. So, if that didn't happen, I'd say that there was a very high likelihood that Kings team would have won the title that year. And then I think you look at Chris Webber a lot differently with that championship.
Yeah, and I think they held it against him too at Michigan. They did get to the national championship game twice and lost. We remember when he called a timeout that they didn't have. But more than that, there were the gambling connections to Michigan, and Michigan had some of those wins vacated. So there was some
only recently have they re-embraced the Fab Five in Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. Which Michigan, that was a pretty good run they had. There were Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard and Chris Webber is one of the better teams to never win a national championship. They lost to Duke and one national championship in North Carolina, and another should have beat North Carolina. They were a better team. They just had an off night. But yeah, so that may have been something. But I'm glad he's in. But yeah, you're right, Jet. There's just too many people getting into the Basketball Hall of Fame. I mean, it's like, who's not in the Basketball Hall of Fame? That's more of the point.
Yeah, this 2020 class was, the rare exception where you're like, yep. Those no-brainer, all three of those guys, absolute no-brainers. Don't even have to think twice about it.
No, not at all. That's a damn good class. Best ever, I think.
And we're well before they retired too. You knew they were all going to be first ballot Hall of Famers.
Oh, sure.
Kobe and Duncan, within like the first 5 years of their career, you're like, yep, they're in the Hall of Fame already.
Yeah, Duncan had 3 titles in his first 4 titles in his first 9 years. This guy's the greatest power forward ever.
Yeah. So great class, good speeches. Obviously an emotional night with Kobe Bryant going in. And so this, it's a tough act to follow with this 2021 class because it's nowhere near as good. But still, I'm happy Paul Pierce is going in, deserves it. I'll be anxiously awaiting his speech. And the third Celtic we didn't mention that's getting is Mike Gorman getting inducted into Hall of Fame. Well deserved for Mike Gorman as well, who's been doing this for a very, very long time and has been one of, if not the best at it, for also a very, very long time.
And even a nicer man, really. I mean, I've got to meet him several times back in the 80s. And then when I started going back in a few years ago, and he was the same guy, very receptive, just a very, very nice guy and a total pro. Look, we all love Tommy Heinsohn, but that had to be difficult to work alongside Tommy because Tommy was the star of the broadcast. And Mike Gorman understood that, and he enhanced what Tommy was doing.
Right, that's the best version of play-by-play is when you enhance the color person.
That's like Mike Breen, who was in the class of 2020, deservedly so. Same thing. He lets Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy be the stars. He sets them up. Same thing with Mike Gorman. I'm glad for Mike Gorman that he's going to be in Springfield.
Yeah, it's cool that he gets to go in with Paul Pierce and Bill Russell too. So it's a very Celtic-centric class. Also, not too far of a ride for Mike Gorman to take down the Springfield.
No,
nice and easy for him. So that was the Hall of Fame weekend. I enjoyed it. I knew I would. I was excited. I did think, I don't know why I thought this, Sep, that the person inducting them would also make some remarks or a speech.
I said the same thing.
I guess maybe that just doesn't happen. I must have just had it wrong. I thought that Jordan would say a few words or Isaiah Thomas, but I guess they just sit up there.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because, wouldn't you love to have heard Jordan talk about Kobe?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, we wanted to hear Vanessa Bryant talk about Kobe more than anyone, and she was spectacular. But, that was Kobe's favorite player, although I'd always heard that Magic was his favorite player, but, we don't have to get into a debate over that. But Kobe was Michael Jordan, 94% of Michael Jordan. Jordan was better. No one's debating that, but he was the same damn player. It's like, I don't know if I've ever seen a sport where you go, here's an all-time great, and here's another guy who's 94% as good, and everything about him is the same.
Yeah, they play the exact same way.
It's like he shit him out. Here's Kobe is the same size, right? 6'6".
There's great YouTube videos that side by side, the same moves and everything like that.
It's scary. And even Kobe's first 3 or 4 years, he sounded like Jordan. He walked like him. It was like, is he doing a Daniel Day-Lewis impression of Michael Jordan because he's doing a damn good one. And I think it would have been cool to see MJ give a few words, but I also think I understand that you wanted it to be about Vanessa Bryant because what she's gone through over the last 15 months. Because look, MJ is going to dominate everything, right? I mean, he will dominate if there's the president of the United States up there. He's that big, and he does it without even saying much, right? Because Jordan's not a guy you hear from very often. He's kind of got a little Greta Garbo in him. He likes to golf, gamble. He owns the Charlotte team, and he makes a lot of money from Nike. He seems to have a pretty simple life for himself. It doesn't seem like he does a lot of different things. So maybe it was better the way they did it, but it would have been interesting to hear Michael Jordan talk about Kobe.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe he will at some point. Yeah, I think he has a hard time doing it. It seems like it really affected him, as it affected everybody. It really had. I mean, when something like that happens, a tragic accident, it's like it really affects everybody.
I still can't believe it, Jet. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, why Kobe's going to the Hall of Fame? Where is he? Like, why isn't Kobe at the ceremony? Like, why isn't Kobe sitting courtside at Staples?
It's impossible to believe.
It's like I'm like, where is he? It's just like I just think of us as fans or whatever. Just think about his wife and his 3 daughters, and not just Kobe, but Gianna and also the other 7 people in that helicopter on that tragic day. I was out that day. I think it was the week before the Super Bowl, Kansas City, San Francisco Super Bowl. So it was like kind of a quiet Sunday. There was no football. I was out running errands, and then went on Twitter and see Kobe Bryant trending. I'm like, okay.
I was sure it was bogus when it came out. I was sure
that's the first thing you think of, right?
Fake.
Yeah. I mean, before that, the worst that I remember was when, I mean, again, this has nothing to do with sports, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, when he died, it was the Sunday of the Seattle-Denver Super Bowl back in February of 2014. So we're talking 6 years before that, when Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I think is one of the great actors this country's ever produced, died from an apparent overdose. And I just remember, like, this has got to be a hoax. That Philip Seymour Hoffman makes movies. He's great. What do you mean he's not?
Yeah,
he's gone. It's just it was
and
jarring.
Kobe, sort of the opposite of Jordan post career, in that he's he's all over the place. Won an Oscar. Very involved. Still doing Nike commercials. Involved with the Lakers all the time. So, I mean, the day before, 2 days before the crash, he was sitting courtside of the Lakers game as LeBron passed him in the all-time scorers list. I mean,
and
he was like just on TV.
It seemed like they were starting to build some sort of friendship a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not
tough.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at that level, sometimes you're just too competitive to get friendly with some other guy that people
I think
debate
he also
who's
looked
better.
at LeBron as like a carpetbagger.
Yeah, I mean, he could. Although Kobe, and I don't want to speak ill will of the dead, but I mean, Kobe did request or demand a trade. He basically said it's either me or Phil Jackson or me and Shaq. So I mean, it got resolved. But I think MJ. I think if MJ and Kobe got together, neither one would be huge fans of LeBron because it's a different player. It's a totally different player. I think Magic would say, this guy LeBron's better than everybody. Whereas Kobe and
like
Michael,
Kobe's like MJ. We know Jordan doesn't like LeBron.
No.
Kobe, LeBron's tried to spin this narrative of they were really close and they were close. I don't think that was ever. I don't think Kobe particularly liked him because I think when you're that great, everybody threatens you too. And I think he didn't like seeing him in a Laker jersey and potentially winning titles, which he eventually did. And people starting to have the debate, well, who's the better Laker, Kobe or LeBron? I don't think he wanted that at all. I don't think. I think it's the same mentality as Jordan. I don't think he liked LeBron.
Yeah.
I don't think he cared to see LeBron in a Laker jersey.
I think LeBron wanted to like Kobe, and I think LeBron would like
wants everybody to like him. Yes,
because he's not comfortable being the villain. He's not. He doesn't want to be the man in the black hat. Whereas Kobe and Michael Jordan, again, I keep mentioning 4 sociopaths that I've seen in sports. It's Kobe and Michael Jordan, the 2 basketball players that are really sociopathic out there. Tom Brady and Barry Bonds. Those are the 4 guys that are just wired differently than everybody. So yeah, I don't think there were a lot of friends out there. Kobe I don't think really got along great with his teammates.
No,
we know Jordan didn't. I mean, Jordan punched his teammates, whereas LeBron's
No, I don't think
more
either one of them
inclusive.
got along well with their
No,
teammates.
LeBron's more of an inclusive guy. He's
I mean, Shaq and Kobe. I mean, that's one of the most famous inter-team rivalries in the history of sports.
And that took years before they mended fences. And even then, I don't know how far it went. Just different. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant is a reasonable facsimile of.
Yeah, in like every way. It's very strange. It's like every way. But yeah, so listen, that wraps up the Hall of Fame class, and we could talk about Kobe on end and Garnett and Duncan as well. And I'm sure Duncan likes the fact that we're mostly talking about Kobe, even though we both agree that he was the best player of that class.
Poor Duncan gets in the Hall of Fame.
Just the way he
probably
wants
the way
it,
he liked it. Yeah. Yep. No tie, nothing fancy. I mean, I think a good friend of ours, Alan Bell from CBS Sportsline, tweeted out a picture. He says, my favorite picture of Tim Duncan is him returning clothes at an Old Navy.
Yeah.
Like he's in line waiting with people.
Typical
to return.
Saturday.
Yeah. Target, get a haircut, go to the post. Like there was nothing. I would say that in the history of sports, I don't know of a superstar player, all-time great, who was
that casual,
that casual, or not into himself all that much. Like he was not a self-promoter at all. He just was.
What's he done with his money?
Probably saved it. I mean, and then let's not forget, he used to give discounts to the Spurs.
Put it in a retirement fund.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got like just a savings account and a checking.
I mean, pennies,
just
penny stocks.
very simple. Now he's an assistant coach, and when he talked about Popovich, that may have been the highlight of the entire evening. I know. Let's just put Vanessa Bryant off to the side because that's hopefully we never see anything like that situation again where a wife is inducting her husband who died at 42. Let's hope we don't see that. But that was a pretty cool moment with Duncan and Popovich because you could just see that those guys, they really love each other. And I'm interested again. Well, I always
and are so like-minded.
They're the same, like just very focused, like Brady and Belichick. Now that lasted about the same time. I mean, Brady and Belichick 20 years.
Yeah, but
Duncan
and badly in San
19 years. No, not at all. Because Duncan was again Brady for the most part for I'd say half his career was similar to Duncan. Like there wasn't really much pushback. Finally, towards the end, he became a brand and he wanted to expand himself. I wonder when Brady gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, if Belichick's going to be there and what kind of connection there is there.
I would guess good. It's going to be good at the end.
Hope. Yeah. I actually don't because the better story would be he doesn't show up or Brady doesn't mention his name. That would be kind of maybe Tom Sr. will be the one up there on stage dissing on the Patriots and Bill Belichick because he's good at that.
So we've talked about the past, Sap. Let's talk about the present of the league right now as the season just wrapped up. So we have to hand out awards. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through these quickly because, like you said, we're going to probably agree on a good amount of them. I also did I told you I was going to do this. I wanted to be petty and come up with the anti-awards. So I have a least valuable player. I have a worst defensive player of the year and the worst coach of the year.
I like that.
That's okay. I also have 6 all-defensive teams and 10 all-NBA teams.
So we'll be done by Friday.
Yeah, we'll be. So, I have really gotten to the defensive teams things. I was saying, okay.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Yeah, I'm sure you've got all sorts of guys on there.
So, Sap, I mean, I think let's start with MVP, where I think we've been in lockstep for a couple months now. It's Jokic, right?
Yeah, without question. I mean, this pushback now from LeBron James saying Steph Curry should be the MVP. And
Jesus, LeBron.
Well, he's probably buttering him up at this point.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
Well, he's setting, sorry. What he's not buttering him up. He's setting the narrative for himself again. Oh, I beat the guy who should have been the MVP of the league in this play-in game. We had a very hard road to the. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, and then in the conference finals, I beat the real MVP, Nikola Jokic, and then in the finals, I beat 3 all-time great players. Yeah, this could be a historic run for LeBron. I mean, we know 2016 coming back from 3-1 down to the 73-win Golden State Warriors is like winning 2 championships. If he look, I mean, this play-in tournament, they could lose to Golden State and then beat either Memphis and San Antonio and still make the playoffs. But if they beat Steph and then go ahead and beat Phoenix, where Chris Paul's going to be a top 5 MVP vote getter, and then you go on from there and you beat whoever's next, and then Jokic, and then that's pretty good accomplishment. I have Jokic winning it. I have Curry second because Golden State's 37-26 when Steph plays. They're 2-7 when he doesn't play. They're a top 5 offense when he's on the court. They're an historically bad offense when he's off the court. All those metrics lead me to think that he's going to get a lot of MVP votes. And again, there's always a recency bias. I mean, he was electric against Memphis in that game on Sunday, which gave Golden State the 8 seed and Memphis the 9 seed. After that, I go with Joel Embiid. I think Giannis has to get some votes. He's had a season similar to his last 2, except he's missed quite a few games. CP3, who's getting a lot of traction. I think I voted him 5th. And then Luka would be 6th. And then after that, you could go with James Harden, but he missed too many games. Same thing with LeBron. They missed too many games. But the Nets are a completely different team. Look, the Lakers are completely different without LeBron. We know that. And the Nets are completely different without Harden. Harden puts everything together. He's like the cement makes all the bricks fit together when he's out there. But yeah, it's got to be Jokic. He didn't miss a game. He carried his team. Jamal Murray missed a ton of games. They made some
had
trades
other
at the
injuries
deadline.
too. They started out poorly. They ended up as they're the 3 seed.
Yeah, they're the 3 seed. Yeah, no one wanted to be the 3. No one wanted to be the 3, or no one wanted to see the Lakers get to the 6, and they didn't want to be the 3. I mean, it's like everybody was tanking at the last weekend to avoid the Lakers. But yeah, I mean, no, Jokic should be the MVP. I think people are overthinking this.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think you said it perfectly, Seth. They're overthinking it. The numbers are there. The amount of wins are there. The fact that he carried his team by playing every game through injuries. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. And I mean, we'll talk about this, I think, at a later podcast. I know that your guy Nick Wright thinks it's like the worst MVP. He's the worst player to ever win MVP. I would disagree with that. I think he's put together a season that you could consider somebody for an MVP in any given year. I think he's been spectacular, and
looks like a Larry Bird year, doesn't it?
I don't know by what metric you would say he doesn't deserve MVP.
Yeah, I mean, it's Steve Nash won 2 MVPs. In retrospect, he probably should have won maybe one of them. I mean, Chris Paul is kind of doing for Phoenix what Steve Nash did for Phoenix. Steve Nash had slightly better numbers, but you get the point. Like, okay, let's pick a guy on the second best team who is the most well-known player on that team is Chris Paul. Like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton aren't going to get MVP votes. I think people are overthinking. I mean, Jokic's year looks like a Larry Bird year.
Yeah, it really does.
27, 11, and 8. I mean, just like it looks like a Larry Bird year, and the team's winning, and he played every game, and they had all those injuries. Again, I agree, Jed. I think people are just overthinking this. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, so let's go to Defensive Player of the Year, Sap, because I strongly disagree with who the experts are going with this year, and I'll explain why in a second. I picked Ben Simmons as my Defensive Player of the Year.
Me too.
Who'd you have? You
Me
do?
too.
Oh, holy crap, Sap, we agreed.
Yeah.
Mine is based off of this. Listen, Rudy Gobert's going to have like 10 of these awards by the time his career's over. They just seem to give it to him. And he's a fabulous defender, but he's a post defender. The NBA game is played at the 3-point line now.
Yep.
It is. The most important players are the wing players, and that's who Ben Simmons is guarding every night. Gobert guards the post players. He's the best in the league. I'm not arguing that. He's the best post defender in the league, unquestionably. But
except when he plays Joel Embiid, who stuffed him in the basket. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that should count against him, frankly, Sab.
Yeah, time to step up, right?
He didn't show any defensive prowess against the guy who's, was the presumptive MVP of the league at that time during that game. And I think you have to put value on the guys who have the tougher task. And right now, the tougher task is defending the guys who are at the top of the 3-point line, driving to the basket. Ben Simmons just does a lot more work than Rudy Gobert, and his impact in the game, I think, is much stronger. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter to have a rim protector, but the way the game is played now, you need to have somebody who defends the perimeter. And Ben Simmons is almost every single night defending the best player on the other team. And I'm not a huge Ben Simmons guy, but I can't deny the defense.
And I am. I'm a big Simmons guy. You know that. We disagree on that, which is odd because one of his best skills is defense, and you're the defensive guy. If he ever developed a shot, consistent shot 35% from three, and if he even took 3 or 4 threes a game, man, he'd be really dangerous. I mean, that's why I always give Giannis a lot of credit. Giannis is not a great 3-point shooter, but he'll take 4 or 5 in a game and hit 35%.
At least
That's
makes you
good enough
think
to
about it.
right, loosens things up. But I think Simmons, because he's such a versatile defender, I mean, he's a physical specimen. I mean, if you see him and Giannis on the court together, they're both like, holy crap, these guys are like 6'10, 6'11, 250, and they move like gazelles. They almost look like giant versions of Russell Westbrook. Like they're just that athletic. And I think Simmons deserves this award. I'm right with you on that, Jet.
Do you agree with the award should now, based off how the game is played, should go towards guys who are defending the
Oh,
perimeter?
hell yeah. Absolutely. I mean, Draymond Green has won it because Draymond Green kind of does all of it. Like he can be a rim protector, even though he's only 6'6", but he can guard multiple positions. That's what you need, that versatility. Yeah. I mean, the old school rim protector, look how many shots are being hoisted up from three. I think 35% of the shots in this league come from 3-point range, so
who's playing post offense anymore is what I'm saying. No one's posting up.
The Lakers occasionally do because Andre Drummond is like right out of 1984. And LeBron and Anthony Davis can. That's why they're going to be a tough matchup because no one's used to dealing with that. But the Lakers still put up a lot of threes. Yeah, there's not a lot of post guys in the NBA. I mean,
and I know he defends the pick and roll and he does a great job.
Yeah.
He's a terrific defender, Gobert, but you don't defend the three well in the NBA, you don't win games, period.
No, that's why the Bucks have a chance in this tournament because they can shoot threes and they defend threes. When you can do that, and that's what Utah did really well this year, that gives you a chance to win because that's where the games have been decided, especially the last 5-6 years.
Of the 5 teams that we think can win the championship, we've talked about this, the 2 LA teams, the Bucks, the Sixers, and the Nets. 4 of those teams are elite defensively, and one is like the best freaking offensive team I've ever seen. So it is interesting that you have, what I think are probably the 4 best defensive teams. Maybe Utah, you could consider being a little bit better defensively than those teams. It makes a difference. Playing defense matters. It does. I know it's the 3 points and it's a high scoring league, but you got to have guys who can defend. And I think Ben Simmons it's just so valuable to have somebody who defends that. And again, this is coming from a guy who's not a Ben Simmons guy, but I acknowledge the defense. I think he's proven that he's the most valuable defensive player in terms of the versatility he brings.
I'm with you. Defensive player of the year for Ben Simmons.
Sap, who you got for coach of the year?
This is a tough one because I think there's really 3 worthy candidates. I know that Tom Thibodeau is most likely going to win. I'm going to go with Monty Williams. Phoenix ended up winning 51 games. That's my guy. I mean, I wanted the Lakers to hire him a couple of years ago. I just love his whole story. He lost his wife, I think 10, 12 years ago, and he's just persevered, and he's just such a class act, and he was a damn good player in the NBA. And they improved from last year. They added Chris Paul, and Chris Paul's a big reason that they ended up with the second best record in the league. But I think
that's almost
deserves
worked
a lot of
against
credit
him,
too.
Right?
It really has, right? Because they're just saying it's Chris Paul, right? It's like they're an average team, but Chris Paul's put them over the top. So I like Monty Williams. Thibodeau, I think, is going to win the award. He's done a phenomenal job with the Knicks. He's made them irrelevant. They play outstanding defense. There's another team that plays lockdown defense is the Knicks. They have to because they just don't have the skill set to just outscore you. But I also think that Nate McMillan deserves an awful lot of credit for the Atlanta Hawks.
Point, Sap. It is true.
The Hawks were floundering. 14-20, they fire Lloyd Pierce, and they bring in Nate McMillan, who was an assistant coach with the Hawks, right? And he's 27-11. The Hawks have had one of the best records the second half of the year.
And they play defense now. When people were scoring like 140 on them. Now, he's given Clint Capella a bigger role, who's an excellent defender. And they're playing some of the best basketball of anybody in the NBA since he took over.
Yeah, no, I think if I'm voting, it would go Monty Williams, Thibodeau, Nate McMillan. And that's pretty cool. Nate McMillan getting third place votes by only coaching 38 of the 72 games, but he's been that good. Yeah,
no, he deserves it. I have Thibodeau, and I'm going. It's hard to argue with any of those guys. I'm going based off of I think that roster is dog crap, and he's somehow managed to turn that team into being a playoff, not just a playoff team, but a higher seed than anybody would have imagined. So I mean, he is, by my estimation, he has one very good player and then a couple average players and some bad players. I just, beginning of the season, I would never have imagined this team would even make the playoffs, let alone be where they are. So I'm going to give credit to Thibodeau there. That's my coach of the year.
Yeah, no, you can't go wrong with him, and I think he will win it. It's a great story going to New York and getting that team to play inspired basketball. You're right, Julius Randle, he's going to get some MVP votes as well, and Derrick Rose. It's really a cool story, him coming back and playing at a very high level. But and they could win their series against Atlanta. You're going to have an interesting team in the Eastern Conference second round, either Atlanta or New York, to go along with those three lead dogs of Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, unless Miami upsets Milwaukee in the first round, because Miami did beat them last year and they match up pretty well against them. But that's a discussion for another day. But I'm with you. The coaching choices, you can't go wrong with those three guys.
It's a strong year for coach of the year candidates, and we'll break down later in the week. I think towards the end of the week, the actual playoff matchups after those are figured out, because we have a play-in tournament to talk about. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Just wrapping up the awards, Sap. I think sixth man of the year is maybe the biggest runaway besides MVP is Jordan Clarkson. To me,
I'm with you on that. Yeah, that seems to be a simple one. This is like when you do the Oscars and we all agree who's going to win Best Supporting Actor. It's like a given.
Right. So
I think Jordan Clarkson is going to win that.
Best year of his career. He's been instant offense off the bench. He's the exact type of six man, prototypical six man. No defense, no passing, no rebounding, just lots of scoring.
A lot of scoring.
I think he had a 50-point game this year. Didn't he have a 50-point game off the bench?
Yeah. And Utah kind of needs that, because Utah plays good defense, but they could use some firepower from time to time, and he's offered that this year. So yeah, I'm right with you there. Jordan Clarkson, I think he wins this pretty handily.
Another former Laker that was not properly utilized when he was member of the Lakers, just showing how bad that organization is, except for, people choose to play there.
Well, he did go to Cleveland and played with LeBron.
That's right. He did. Maybe that made him better. Most improved player of the year. This is the last award. I have it as Julius Randle.
That's this might be the easiest of all awards. I mean, the guy has gone from kind of like a journeyman player who had some injury concerns to a guy who's going to get MVP votes. And, we're going to reveal our all NBA teams.
Who else would be in consideration?
Jaylen Brown really had a nice jump from last year to this year, but he was still a borderline all-star last year, and he became an all-star this year.
Devin Booker,
Devin
Ayton.
Booker, yeah, they both got better, but not the way Julius Randle did. Like, Julius Randle, I think, is going to finish 6th or 7th in MVP voting. I mean, I left them out of mine because I think there's like 10 guys that are going to get MVP votes this year, because it's pretty deep. It's not like when Giannis was winning it or LeBron winning it, where it was, pretty much a done deal. You're going to get all sorts of different narratives in the MVP voting. But yeah, I can't think of anybody else beyond Julius Randle. It's not even close.
Yeah, so I think we're in agreement for most of these awards, and I do think that. So that's the way I think it should go. Jokic is going to win MVP. Clarkson is going to win Sixth Man of the Year. Randle, I can't imagine he doesn't win Most Improved Player of the Year. Coach of the Year could go to somebody besides Thibodeau. I mean, it would floor me, but he's certainly the favorite. And Defensive Player of the Year, we both agree is Simmons, but it's going to go to Gobert.
It'll go to Gobert. And then Rookie of the Year comes down to two players.
Yeah. All right.
Anthony Edwards, Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball.
I'd vote Edwards just based off game played. I think Ball is the better player. Edwards played more games.
Yeah, I would go with Ball. Ball 51 games. Anthony Edwards 72. That's a pretty big difference. But when Ball played, he was the better player. Look, Charlotte really, played poorly down the stretch. He was trying to fit his way back in there. They had some injury concerns. I'd go with Ball because I just think he impacted his team more. As good as Anthony Edwards is, and they got Karl Anthony Towns, they're horrible.
They're horrible.
They're really bad. So at least LaMelo, who's a much better passer than Edwards.
Skeleton Celtics defender. Blew them out the other day in Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to see Jake Layman dunk on Taco Fall, and they acted like they won the NBA championship after that.
One of the most embarrassing moments of the season for the Celtics.
Among many, yeah. I'll go with Ball only because, again, I think that his play has impacted winning more so than Anthony Edwards, but either one of those guys is a fine choice.
Yeah, I think, in a later podcast, I want to break down probably this summer, what we thought of this year's rookie class, because
Yep.
it's an interesting one. And I think a very unique challenge for these guys. And you'll see more next year, I think more development because they came in with no camp, 2 preseason games. So yeah, it's an interesting rookie class. So we disagree there. All NBA. So how do you want to do it, Sap? Do you want to just list who we have by position, guards?
Yeah.
Then forwards?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
probably the best way to do it. So I'll start with forwards in descending order. My third team forwards, LeBron and Kawhi. And again, forwards not as deep as guards this year. Guards really deep. Forwards not so much. Again, LeBron and Kawhi, third team. Second team is Zion Williamson and Jason Tatum. And first team is Giannis and Julius Randle. Again, not as deep as guards, but those are the guys who I think are deserving. Sabonis and Paul George may get some votes also. Sabonis has had a really nice year for Indiana. Started getting triple doubles down the stretch. And look, I'm maybe putting LeBron in there as a LeBron guy, but a couple of years ago when he missed a bunch of games, he still made third team All NBA. It's like a birthright for him that he's going to be on one of these teams. So I would think LeBron and Kawhi, even though they missed a lot of games, when they play, they're pretty damn dominant.
Yeah, my third team forwards, I had Tatum and Randall. Second team, I had Jimmy Butler and Zion Williamson.
Mm-hmm.
And my first team, I had Giannis and Kawhi.
Okay, yeah.
The Kawhi, it was hard to put him on first team, but the Clippers were just, I you know how I view them. I view them as title contenders, and he's the best player on that team. And he played more games than LeBron. The only reason I left LeBron off was because he just didn't play many games. I mean, I just have a hard time putting people who play. What did he play? 45 games this year, Sap?
He missed a third of the season.
So I couldn't put him on.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably asking the wrong guy about this.
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Butler missed a lot of games too.
I'm surprised you didn't put him on first team, Sap. So I think that's showing improvement.
I was thinking about it. I mean, he's looking good in his return to the lineup the last 2 games and has everybody shitting their pants in the Western Conference. No one wants to be on their side of the bracket, which if they lose to Golden State, they'll be on the other side of the bracket. So all of those tanking jobs will be kind of for moot point. But yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I put Randall on first team because he was there every game and it's did so many great things. Yeah, I mean, it's a good list. I think Tatum, although we see Tatum every game and we get kind of mad and, well, why isn't he doing more? But, in the grand scheme of things, the 27, 7, and 4 is pretty good. And he had some outstanding, humongous games.
He played a lot considering he had COVID as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think locally we kind of get on him, but nationally he's still really well respected. So we're pretty close on that.
The only difference we had in terms of I left LeBron off and put Jimmy Butler on. You had Jimmy Butler through like piss and vinegar got onto just this unbelievable run the Heat have been on, has managed to squeeze his way into an All NBA team. Also his I like the advanced stats. His advanced stats are off the chart because of his defense.
Oh, he's sensational. Jimmy Butler's grown on me over the last few years to the point where I love watching him play because he's so much more substance over style, right? Like there's no bells and whistles with the guy's game.
Yeah, I wish he wasn't on the Heat because I hate that team, but
right. I mean, if he were on the Celtics, you would.
I'd love him.
Never sleep. God. I mean, he's like your perfect guy. He's got a lot of the same qualities Marcus Smart has, except he's more skilled and he's bigger. No, he's grown on me as a player. Even in the finals last year, he kept coming at the Lakers.
They had no business taking 2 games off that Lakers team.
No. I mean, I think the Lakers, once they got up 3-1, kind of took it easy, and then they were just destroyed them in Game 6. But give Butler a lot of credit. No, he's really grown on me as a player. He's one of those guys where he's moved around, and people have said, well, it's got to be Jimmy Butler's fault. Well, apparently the places he's left, it's the other people's fault because this guy knows how to win. And he's now in an environment where it's all about winning and culture and accountability. Perfect team. You got, Pat Riley.
Them are the Spurs, I guess, right? Would be
probably have the 2 best cultures in the NBA. Yeah, I mean, Popovich and Riley, if you want to doubt them, and I know Riley's not coaching the team, but he's still pretty damn involved, they can start flashing a lot of, championship rings in your face. And at that point you say, well, maybe we got to listen to these old guys. They know what they're talking about.
Right. At centers, we're barely going to touch on this because I think it's a piece
Yeah.
of cake. Jokic 1, Embiid 2, Gobert 3.
That's it. Yeah, that's pretty simple. I mean, keep wanting to get more out of Karl Anthony Towns, and he's going to be one of these guys that puts up a lot of hollow stats in his career, unless he gets moved or somehow Minnesota adds another player. But yeah, that's a simple choice of Jokic, Embiid, and Gobert.
And then, okay, so we'll end with the guards, Sap. So I'll start with my third team guards. I have Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving. Second team guards, I have Chris Paul and Damian Lillard. First team guards, I have Steph Curry and Luka Doncic.
We didn't even talk about this. We didn't cheat, and we have the same exact order. Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty easy.
We're in sync, Sap.
We're in sync. That was quite a group in the 90s and early 2000s. We're not quite as good looking as those guys, but we try. We'd be a good boy band.
Yeah,
I'd actually be more like Laurel and Hardy.
That's what I was going to
say. Yeah. Yeah, Steph and Luka, come on, it's pretty simple. CP3 is going to get a lot of MVP votes, and he's still an elite defender.
What's funny is Paul's going to get more MVP votes than Doncic, I imagine. But Doncic deserves to be on first team more than Paul.
Yeah, and that happens. 1 year, Chamberlain was first team All NBA, Russell was second team All NBA, and Russell won the MVP. So it can happen. And Beal's had a phenomenal year. Kyrie, I mean, I know you can't stand him. To watch him, I think he's one of the most electric players I've ever seen.
It's painful to put him on, but I had to. Well, who the hell else was I going to put on? Westbrook?
He'd be in the afterthought section of guards, and there's a ton of them, whether it be Westbrook, Donovan Mitchell, who missed a lot of games with Utah. James Harden, look, when he was playing, he was as good as anybody. Jaylen Brown had a really nice year, but it shows you how deep the guards are, that he's kind of an afterthought. But Kyrie had a 50, 40, 90 year.
And he played the most games of their guys, and they need to have some representative there.
I think Larry Bird's the only other player that ever had a 50, 40, 90 year while averaging 25 a game. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, the kid is just incredible to watch. I mean, again, he did it again yesterday where he doesn't want to talk about basketball because of all the problems in the world.
He needs people to know that he knows about the problems in the world.
Exactly.
He must tell you that.
What's going on in the world bothers all of us, but you still got to do your job, and you're paid quite handsomely. Just, spend 5 minutes, humor us all, and answer these questions about this, insignificant thing you do playing basketball, but on the court, man, spectacular.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we matched the guards there. Yeah. My hardest omission, Sap, last guy's out. Westbrook. I mean, the numbers are freaky. LeBron, Devin Booker, Paul George, Donovan Mitchell. Those were my last guys out.
That's how deep the league is, right? I mean, I've said this a million times. This is the most talent we've ever seen in the league. I mean, we're leaving off guys that are, phenomenal players. And we're like, when you said Devin Booker, I even forgot about him. And he's, if he might have been 6th team All NBA if they went that far, and he's dynamite.
Right. So all defensive team, I'll do it quickly because I know people don't really care, and we're running out of time here. Ben Simmons, Drew Holiday as the guards, Giannis and Royce O'Neal as the forwards.
Okay.
And then Rudy Gobert as the center there.
Yeah, really no qualms with that. That's a good group.
I like Royce O'Neal, Sap. I like the random guys who play good defense who don't really do much else.
Well, I mean, you know what? It's a valuable thing to do, because in an offensive league, those who play defense, their value goes up. It's almost like, in baseball, you talk about power and all of these other things, but we did watch the LA Dodgers last year, and Mookie Betts, he was good in the postseason hitting. He was ridiculous defensively, and Tampa Bay won a Super Bowl. Yes, Tom Brady gets most of the credit. Their defense was lights out throughout the postseason. So it still matters to have good defensive teams.
Lakers were the best defensive team in basketball last year.
And they've been pretty close to that this year when all together. And that's why I think a lot of people are still picking them, because in a Brooklyn Lakers potential final,
definite final.
You think it's a definite final. I'm still, I would like to see that, because I'd like to see LeBron beat those 3 guys. But you'd have defense against offense, and we'll see what happens if it happens.
So can I end this Sap with my pettiness and my least
Yes.
valuable awards? Okay. I don't know that you did this because you're nicer than
I
me.
didn't go this far. I'm much nicer.
You like meeting new people. I don't. I
Yep.
like to complain a lot. Also, by the way, hard for me to omit Marcus Smart from those all defensive teams, but I had to. I mean, he didn't deserve it this year. He didn't.
Mhm.
So worst coach of the year, Sap. You like this one. I have a tie, the rare tie between your guy, Stan Van Gundy,
Yep.
and Brad Stevens. I think they equally deserve being crapped on for terrible coaching jobs this year.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtics were 36-36. Actually, of the 4 teams in the Eastern Conference play-in tournament, they're the only one that doesn't have a losing record. So that's something you can hang your hat on, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Stan Van Gundy's a disaster in New Orleans. And Brad Stevens did not have a good year. And again, I fault Danny Ainge more for that roster construction. But yeah, there were higher
worst executive
expectations.
of the year. I just have worst coach of the year.
Okay. All right. But those are 2, should we say 2 bad choices?
Yeah, 2 bad
choices for bad. It's like the Bizarro World in Seinfeld.
Worst defensive player of the year, Sap. Congratulations to Doug McDermott of the Indiana Pacers. He had a negative 2.1 defensive plus minus, meaning whenever he was on the court, teams averaged 2.1 points better, which was the worst mark in the league. And he played almost every game this season. So,
well, he would have fit in with the Celtics because
I'll give him the flaming dumpster trophy.
Wasn't that what Danny Ainge was holding out for when they were going to trade Gordon Hayward to Indiana? Instead, he went to Charlotte for the trade exception. They were going to get Miles Turner and Dougie McDermott. Miles Turner actually is getting some traction for first or second team All NBA defensive team.
Yeah, didn't play enough games, but he led the league in blocks per game.
Yeah.
I will say this: the trophy that I've imagined is the picture of that guy dunking on Taco Fall for worst defensive player of the year. That's the trophy.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And my least valuable player, Sap of the year. Congratulations to Grant Williams of the Boston Celtics.
Ooh.
He managed a negative 0.6 value over replacement player, playing 62 games this year, meaning that he was worse than the average player at his position by a pretty significant margin for someone who played a lot of games. It wasn't the worst VORP in the league, but I also had the opposite of pleasure of watching him play almost every game and coming up with a Shaqtin' and a full blooper almost every single game. So he's my least valuable player of the season.
I like that. He played a lot of minutes for a guy that really doesn't add much.
-6 VORP, Sap, 0.6.
That's pretty bad.
That's the NBA equivalent to WAR. If you're not aware of it, it stands for value over replacement player. It's basically the exact same thing. So yeah, there are our least valuable awards. Grant Williams takes home the big trophy. Doug McDermott gets the Taco Fall being dunked over trophy, and Brad Stevens and Stan Van Gundy get the Jeff Van Gundy being dragged by Patrick Ewing ankles trophy. Or Alonzo Mourning. I forget which one it was dragged doing the dragging.
Alonzo Mourning, yeah.
Right? Isn't that that's a good trophy for the worst coach of the year?
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Jeff Van Gundy with his receding hairline, and Jeff Van Gundy always dressed like, a substitute teacher, like chalk on his pants and the tie, not properly made. I mean, he was like the anti Pat Riley, and he was his assistant coach. Talk about, like before and after. And he was just hanging on for dear life on Alonzo Mourning's calf.
I think they should create a trophy with that image.
That'd be a great trophy. Yeah, worst coach of the year right there.
All right, so that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We know this was a long episode, but we had a lot to get through. We're going to talk about the play-in tournament tomorrow, preview the matchups in the Eastern and Western Conference, give you our thoughts there. So make sure you check it out. We'll tweet out the links for you at JohnSap25 is Sap's Twitter. Mine is at JetStryer, which is also the youtube.com/JetStryer for the visual presentation. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Thanks everybody for listening, and check us out tomorrow for our play-in tournament preview. See you, everybody.